Hey guys, Ryan here. Thank you for tuning in to another YouTube video here on my channel. I know this is a little bit of a different thing than a vacuum video. Don't worry, I will be doing more vacuum videos in the near future. It's going to get a couple more, plan to save money, get a couple more different machines I'll be able to do videos on. But until then, I figured I'd try to expand, hopefully my audience base and touch a little bit on video games and other forms of tech that I'm interested in. And it's getting close to the holiday season. You know, Halloween's right around the corner. Yep, it's October 8th. So the Halloween's right around the corner. That means the holiday season's about to start. That means Thanksgiving is going to be coming soon. And then when it comes to Black Friday, people are going to be rushing Walmart, Target, and other stores to get all the goodies and get all the toys for the kids and get all the goodies for the Christmas season because, you know, prices are extremely low. And I thought about getting a couple different game consoles. For example, the NES Classic Edition, which is still around. In fact, I'll show you. In case if you didn't know, Nintendo wised up and brought back the NES Classic Edition, and I even confirmed it looking at Wikipedia. I know you might think Wikipedia is not a very reliable source, but I would say it's reliable enough that, you know, that this information is accurate. So, just showing that Nintendo did wise up and bring back the NES Classic Edition for sale. They brought it back June 29th, 2018. Before they had discontinued it April 13th, 2017 in North America, and then worldwide at April 15th, 2017. And of course, they got a really big backlash, and I guess there was still a lot of demand for this particular little classic gem, you know, by Nintendo fans and gamers across the country, probably across the world, whatever. And so they brought it back. So they're selling that as well as the Super Nintendo system, and I'll show you that right there. Yep, there's the Super NES. But I might do videos on that. And I might do more videos on that dedicated to that. But so far, I wanted to show some of the reviews that this Genesis Flashback console has been getting. I'm a big Sega fan. I love Sega Genesis. You know, that was the system I grew up as a little kid. You know, when I was 6 years old, I started playing Sega Genesis. And I actually had, and I'll show you this, and there's a perfect picture showing, I had the original Genesis, the one here on the right, if you see this picture on the right. And maybe if we can find a better, well, I guess I can't. Had the model on the right. And actually had, like, Sonic Hedgehog 2, I think had Sonic Hedgehog 1 as well as Sonic Hedgehog 3. And a couple other games for it. And it's a really awesome system, and it's still an awesome system to this day. It's a classic. It's a legendary console. You know, in the video game industry. You know, it's just plain awesome. You know, the console wars between Genesis and Super Nintendo. What's his name? Cinemassacre. If I pronounce that correctly, that's the YouTube channel. It goes into detail comparing the Genesis and the Super Nintendo Classic System. I'll have to look up that video, and I'll post that in the description so you can check it out. And of course, you know, subscribe to his channel too if you're a big gamer fan. If you know, he's known as the Angry Video Game Nerd. He does a lot of his reviews of really shitty video games and everything. It's really entertaining to watch. But I've been coming across the original, the classic game, the Sega Genesis Classic game console, which you see here, and I thought, oh, this is really cool. like a little Genesis. It was a Genesis. It's technically, it looks like a little. This one kind of looks like a stupid little generic box, but it's supposed to play classic, Genesis game consoles. And then they came out with a Sega Genesis Flashback, which looks like the original Sega Genesis. And of course, the gamer in me was thinking, "Holy shit, this is awesome! I can't wait! I want it." Well, before I decided to jump into it and save up money and get it, I figured I'd look at the game reviews. Reviews of the system, mainly, of course, from IGN, Polygon, and let's just say, and I'll open up the article, one of them, just to show and talk about the reviews I've heard about it. Is very depressing, to say the least. This particular console, this particular Sega Genesis console, is made by a company called AtGames, and apparently AtGames is not very well known for creating high quality retro game replica game consoles, even the Genesis. So this, again, the Sega Genesis Flashback was made by AtGames, I guess to cash in on the nostalgia market, but it's also a way to continue the Sega Genesis game console, which the original Genesis was discontinued in 1997 by Sega, although it was still being made a little bit later on by Majesco, and I'll show you what that looked like. And again, I don't have a script, or anything like that. This was, for example, this is the Majesco version, if I can bring it up. There we go. There we go. The Genesis 3. This particular game console was actually after Sega discontinued the Genesis in 1997. I think this was sold in 1998 by a company called Majesco. So this was a third-party game console system. But you know what's crazy? This Genesis 3, for example, it doesn't look nearly as cool as the Model 1 Genesis or even the Model 2 Genesis. Both third-party consoles. This system could still play Genesis games perfectly. Of course, I guess it would have to. I mean, it was an actual legit game console. It wasn't, just like a retro game console cashing in nostalgia. This was, made by Majesco, licensed by Sega, to kind of continue on the Genesis game console a little bit more. I think it was finally discontinued. I forget when. I'll have to look it up. There's the box of the Majesco's Sega Genesis, which is basically just a core system. No fancy shit. It was just basically the original. The original Genesis, basically a scaled down version of the Genesis. And so, of course, sorry, I'm looking at here. Okay, it was discontinued in 1999. Majesco Entertainment discontinued their Genesis game console in 1999. But it was still being made overall by AtGames. There's Blaze Europe and Tectoy. But here in America, it's made by AtGames. So technically, you could say that Genesis is still being made. But from what I heard about it, the flashback system, the Sega Genesis Flashback, does not do the system, the Genesis, enough justice. From what I've heard, from what I've been reading, and I've read the articles, I've seen game reviews. I was really kind of hoping that that maybe I thought, okay, maybe this is over exaggerated. Maybe it's not completely like the original Genesis. Excuse me. Maybe thinking. I was kind of thinking, maybe it's just slightly off in a little bit. Maybe it's just slightly off for me in sound. Maybe it's just a tiny bit laggy, but hopefully it would still be useful. And I was kind of hoping that because, like I see this flashback system looks really cool. And this actually has an HDMI output, so you can hook it up to your HDMI TV to play it on your newer TVs. So, for example, the flashback, as according to this article from Polygon, from Christopher Grant from Polygon.com. Apparently, the game the flashback comes with 2.4 gigahertz wireless controllers, which is better than I guess the SNES Classic's short wires. So I guess for the SNES, I guess you gotta either get extension wires or sit really close to the TV. For me, I'd be sitting close to the TV, so to the TV I'd be playing. So for me, it wouldn't be a problem. Apparently, according to this reviewer, the latency, the connection with the controllers isn't that great. It feels cheap. It kind of looks like a replica of the Genesis controllers, but it doesn't have the same quality to it. There's a tiny screw that you have to deal with to put in AAA batteries. And of course, they're showing the wireless controller AtGames provides compared to the original Sega Genesis controller. But of course, it has the advantage of having two controller ports, the DB9 ports. That's what the original Genesis used. So you could plug in, your original Genesis controllers if you get it from eBay, if you have some lying around. Okay, great. And of course, again, there's that HDMI port. SE, another great. It's like sweet. So you can plug it into your HD TV, and you'll be able to play games on it. And there's a better picture. And of course, like I said, it looks like the original Sega Genesis a lot. I think the only big difference was doesn't have the volume control on it. Which isn't really a big gripe. I don't think anybody really used the volume control of the Sega Genesis, the first model Genesis. But still, it kind of looks like the original Genesis, but smaller. And it actually has, an actual cartridge slot. So yes, it could play Genesis cartridges. So based on my understanding, when I first heard about this new model was, of course, with the Classic, that you could pop in your cartridge and you'd be able to play it. So it has apparently 80 games or so, 80 something games in it. You're thinking, of course, at first glance, you're thinking, 80 built-in games. That means whole tons of Sega Genesis games. Not really, and I'll show you, and I'll scroll down and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So yeah, there's another zoom in. Again, there's the cartridge slot that's enough that you could pop in any Genesis cartridge that you would have. So if you had a whole bunch of, maybe you have your collection of old Genesis games that you had, maybe your old Genesis died or whatever, or maybe you have a new TV and you want to play your Genesis games, but the hookups for the original Genesis won't work for your new TV. You think, okay, great, this is a great alternative. Well, this is where the disappointment sets in for me that I've been reading in reviews, and that really is a big letdown and a big deal breaker for me here. The game experience for these, for this system is, from what I heard, and what I've seen on review videos, crappy as hell. And apparently AtGames is known for making really bad, cheap ass plug and play systems, which I would think of, think if you're selling game systems, I don't think you would want to be known as selling cheap game systems, but I guess that's the case. When you see a single classic game console at a Family Dollar, any toys at Family Dollar or any electronics at Family Dollar, or other dollar stores, you kind of have to be like, buyer beware. So, as I was saying before, here's the big deal breaker for me is that the games apparently run badly. According to I'll read this quote from here. Quote, the games run badly. In fact, they ran so badly in the first unit, AtGames sent me the review, the author of this article, the same unit that other outlets reviewed back in July, that the company told the reviewer that it had, quote, here, let me just read it again. The games run badly. In fact, they ran so badly in the first unit, AtGames sent me, the author, the same unit that the other outlets reviewed back in July, that the company told me it had an issue with the emulation software and asked me not to review it, in order to give them a chance to send me an updated unit. Okay, so wait a minute. So AtGames gives this reviewer a system where the emulation runs badly. How the hell does a system that's supposed to, a Genesis, third-party Genesis that basically looks like the original Genesis, and that has games built in that's from the Genesis game console, that even can play any Genesis cartridge that you have, how the hell does the emulation run badly? I've having emulators on my smartphone I'm recording this on, that I'm doing this video on. I have an emulator that can run Genesis classic Genesis games like Sonic the Hedgehog perfectly, and even Master System games, which I just discovered with the emulator had. Didn't say Sega Master System, it said MD for Mega Drive in its menu, but it can run Master System games as well, and it runs those perfectly. So, I don't know. And of course, like I said, when I read the quote from this article, any pronouns me is referring to Christopher Grant. So this is from his first person point of view. Anyway, so back to this. It says, reasonable request considering the product wouldn't be released until late October. Be curious why a subpar product was sent to reviews that far in advance of release in the first place. Okay, business. That's one big fuck up that AtGames did, and that no company should do, especially if you're sending something to a reviewer to test it and keep, and to review it and give it a rating, for potential customers, potential consumers that you're trying to sell the system to. You want to make sure that the system works properly, or that your product works properly. Because if you give them a subpar product and they give it a bad review, guess what? Customers are going to be like, I don't know if I want to buy this. Back to this quote, he said, nevertheless, I waited and waited and waited. I sent emails. Finally, the unit was shipped, and curiously, it had new embargo. Strange request, given that it was for review of the same product I shipped to myself and other reviews months ago. Even more curious, while some other issues were corrected in this updated unit, the best I can tell, it similarly suffers from the frame rate issues, just like the July unit. Okay, AtGames. If there's anybody from AtGames watching, PR department watching this video, I'm referring this to you, AtGames. Why the hell would you sell a system or give a system to a reviewer to test out and give a proper review on why the hell would you give them a system that where the frame rate where it has frame rate issues? This is basically an emulator in a casing that you're selling to customers. I mean, come on. I have there's emulators that play Genesis games that can run better. Anyway, so here's again, he shows the interface. Again, here's another stupid thing that it does. You know that D-pad, in a menu, you think you'd be able to use the D-pad, scroll down the menu using your D-pad, move right, it's like a game you want, press A to play, right? Or start. Well, A, they press select. But no, the D-pad doesn't work with the menu. You have to press B for up to move up on the menu, and C to move down on the menu. And then you use the first two buttons on top to go switch between pages. So while this game has 85 built-in games, this is where they kind of trick you. While it's technically true it has 85 built-in games, it does not. There are not 85 Sega Genesis games in the machine. No, there's only 45. So what AtGames did is they put in 45 classic Genesis games, like Alex Kidd Enchanted Castle, Alien Storm, Altered Beast, Arrow Flash, all these games here are on the Genesis Flashback game console. Notice, it has Sonic the Hedgehog and Sonic the Hedgehog 2, and Sonic and Knuckles, and apparently 3D Blast and Spinball. Notice there's no Sonic Hedgehog 3. What the hell? And apparently apparently they include some Master System games, like Alex Kidd in the Miracle World, Alex Kidd in High Tech World, Alex Kidd in Lost Stars, Dragon Crystal Fantasy Zone, the main and the first Fantasy Star game. And it includes apparently some Game Gear games while they're at it. Like here. Okay, so there's at least 45 Sega games. Well, what about the other 28? Well, the other 28 is just crap. Like Adventure in the Park, Air Hockey, Bomber, Bottle Taps Race, Break the Firelight. You get the point. These are basically just a bunch of junker games that really, nobody's going to play because, nobody's going to give a crap about those games. So, like I said, I've been reading through these reviews. I've watched some of the review videos on this system. I do not like what I'm hearing about this system. And in other news, there's something I've also heard. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. There was supposed to be a system called the Sega Genesis Mini. And I'll bring up this article here. Excuse me. So apparently Sega was planning to release the Mini Drive Mini for Europe and Japan, and the Genesis Mini for the United States. So they're delaying it to next year, I guess, for an overhaul. Which I hope, hopefully this overhaul will be good. And I'll read the article here so that we know what you're talking about. I know you can say, well, I could read this article myself. Well, don't worry. Well, if you're watching this video, hopefully, I spare you, can hopefully spare you having to read the article, go and, X out the video and look at the article and everything here. But I'll read the article here about the mini console. And then from there, we'll probably, give my opinions of what Sega should do, regarding the Genesis Flashback console. It says here, quote, Sega has delayed the release of its Mega Drive mini console, which the company announced back in April 2018 to next year. Mega Drive and Genesis. Again, Mega Drive is the Europe and Japanese version of the Genesis. While the push to 2019 may sound like bad news, Sega will miss the 16-bit console's 30th anniversary in Japan due to the change in date. It sounds like Sega is doing the right thing by its classic console. God, I hope so. Because, like I said, I love the Genesis. I think the Genesis is a classic game console. And AtGames, that shit company, has done Genesis wrong by making cheap-ass third-party machines units that don't even work right. Continuing on, it says Sega is now aiming for a global worldwide release of the Mega Drive Mini in Japan and Europe, as well as its Sega Genesis Mini in North America, according to a pair of tweets from Sega's official Japanese Twitter account. So, I guess maybe they're just trying to cash in on mini console thing, nostalgia, kind of like Nintendo was doing with the NES and Super NES Mini, and PlayStation with their mini console. But, hey, cool. In better news, Sega also said it is now working with a domestic Japanese software developer with a proven track record. Again, I hope so. Previously, Sega had announced it was working with AtGames, the company behind the Sega Genesis Flashback console, or it's not called Trashback. That's another what IGN calls it. So yes, IGN, I'm stealing that from you, Trashback, which is something of a disappointment to retro game enthusiasts. It's not clear yet what relationship Sega and AtGames will have, if any, on the project. I'm going to stop right there, and I'm going to. And I hope if anybody from Sega is listening, or maybe you can pitch this idea to Sega. Here's what Sega should do to rectify this, to make sure that the Genesis and the Mega Drive gets the proper gets its reputation restored, to make sure that the Genesis lives on and that that it actually becomes a successful game console that our kids can play and that for us big gamers can play for years to come. Here's what you need to do. Cut all ties with AtGames. Yes, I said it. Cut the ties with AtGames. The AtGames has proven to be a crappy has proven that it can't even make a proper third-party version of the Sega Genesis, which is really sad, considering that I was really, of course, really hoping that this game console, or that this particular third-party version of the Genesis, was really hoping that this would be good. That I was hoping that, that it would play, like an original Sega Genesis, and that I'd be able to plug it in and play Sonic the Hedgehog, and be able to go down to a local video game store close to home, close to where I live, to get to be able to buy Genesis games that aren't included with this system, and maybe and be able to play them. But obviously, the flashback system has proven to be a huge, major disappointment, especially the classic game console. So Sega, here's what you need to do: terminate your third party licensing agreement with AtGames, because AtGames has done nothing but make shitty ass game consoles, and it's hurting the legacy of the Sega Genesis. It is hurting the Genesis's legacy, and I don't want to see this. I don't want to see the Genesis become a laughingstock. So that's the first thing Sega should do. As for the overhaul of the Genesis Mini, here's what I like to see. Apparently Sega is working with a local Japanese software developer, has a proven track record. Great. Hopefully that means that the emulation will be spot on perfect. Here's what you need to do, Sega. If you're gonna make the Genesis Mini, make it, probably the same size as what this system is. Do the overall, definitely include the cartridge slot. Include a real cartridge slot so people can put it in games. But I would love to see it designed so that way it can directly read the Genesis cartridges, instead of having to load it onto memory like this system does that you're seeing right here. And that's another thing I forgot to point out a little bit earlier. I know this video is kind of long. It's been a half an hour of me blabbering on like a fucking idiot about this game, about this piece of shit game system. No, not Genesis. Not saying that Genesis, the original classic Genesis. I'm talking about the AtGames version. AtGames trash bag. With this system, you could play your classic Genesis game cartridges, but it has to load. But it's designed to where it doesn't read it directly. It copies or loads the cartridge onto its memory, or I guess it loads it onto memory so it can emulate that cartridge. And obviously, it does a terrible job. Like I said, I've had used emulators on my Android phone that work better. So hopefully, what Sega should do is design their Genesis Mini to where it'll accept the classic game cartridges. Make it look like the original model, or make it look like the Model 2. I don't care. I mean, you can make it look like the Model 2 if you want to. If you make it look like the Model 2, great. Either way, you can make the Genesis Mini look like this. I don't care. That would be great. Either this, if it looks like this, or it looks like this, I don't really care. I would love to see Sega make a mini Genesis that is faithful designed to the original Genesis console, where it can play the classic cartridges, where you could pop in a classic Genesis game cartridge, and then it could play it just like the original Genesis would. I hope to God, and Sega, please make sure that the emulation is perfect on the mini Genesis. Again, like I said, I've just read in this article, in the one article about the mini being delayed to 2019, that apparently you guys are working with a software developer. Hopefully, I want to see the emulation be spot on with the mini Genesis. If you're going to put in games, make sure all of them are Genesis game console games. We don't want to see freaking, bloatware that like AtGames does. So hopefully in 2019, so like I said, hopefully 2019, hopefully we'll see this, and I hope to God that Sega does the Genesis right, that it gets the Genesis Mini right. Hopefully we get it, and that it'll come in April 2019, and I'll be able to get a Mini Genesis, and I can plug it into the TV and try out a game on there, and it'll run like original Genesis. And if it does, I'll be as happy, giddy as a friggin' schoolboy, 90s schoolboy, if that does happen, because that would be awesome. And hopefully, if Sega plays the cards right, I bet you 2019, the Christmas season 2019, I bet you it'll be a big hit for the next Christmas season. We know this Christmas season, we already know Nintendo's got the Christmas season when it comes to the retro mini game consoles like the NES Mini and the Super NES Mini. We already know Nintendo's got that market clinched. But 2019, hopefully, we'll see the Genesis Mini come out, and hopefully that the Genesis Mini finally fulfill what we're still looking for in a third-party Genesis game console, or this might be a first party. Hopefully, we see the Genesis get resurrected, and hopefully hopefully it'll be a lot better than the Flashback console version. So that's the video. That's my video here. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Hopefully you find it entertaining or find it interesting. Hopefully you found it informative. I will do more videos in the future. Maybe do some more, video game news or game tech. Discuss. Maybe I'll just discuss, video game stuff or tech stuff. Along the way, I'll make more videos as they come along. Feel free to rate, comment, subscribe. Again, if you're looking for a Genesis, I would not buy the Genesis Flashback. Look somewhere else. If you can get the original, look for original Genesis on eBay. Maybe have a TV, but if you don't have one, hold out. Just hold out to next year, and we'll see what Sega does with the Genesis Mini. And who knows? And maybe if that's popular, maybe we'll see more stuff from Sega. So anyway, I'm gonna get off here. So feel free to rate, comment, subscribe, ring the bell to get notified about new videos I post, and hopefully I will see you guys soon.